My story begins in the suburbs of Cleveland, Ohio, in 1989. I was 37 years old, working double shifts at the local diner, my hands permanently stained with coffee and my back aching from years of carrying heavy trays. My son Tyler was 14 then, all sharp angles and brooding silence, his father's eyes staring back at me with a mixture of love and resentment I couldn't quite understand. The house on Maple Street had been our sanctuary once. 3 bedrooms, a small yard where Tyler learned to ride his bike, walls that had witnessed bedtime stories and birthday celebrations. But by 1989, those walls felt more like a prison. The divorce papers from Tyler's father, Robert, had been finalized just months earlier, leaving behind a trail of broken promises and unpaid child support. "Mom, can we get pizza tonight?" Tyler would ask, sprawled across our second-hand couch, his homework spread across the coffee table. "Not tonight, sweetheart. We had pizza last week, remember?" I'd reply, calculating the contents of my wallet against the bills scattered across the kitchen counter. Those were the good conversations. The ones where he still called me Mom without that edge in his voice. Where he still looked at me like I might have answers instead of just more problems. I worked at Henderson's Diner from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, then rushed to my evening job cleaning offices downtown. Some nights, I'd come home to find Tyler asleep on the couch, his chemistry textbook open on his chest, the television casting shadows across his face. He looked so young in those moments, vulnerable in a way he never allowed when awake. "You work too much," my neighbor Mrs. Patterson would say when she'd see me stumbling up the front steps at midnight. She was a kind woman in her 70s, always offering to look after Tyler when my shifts ran long. "What choice do I have?" I'd whisper back, not wanting to wake my son. But the truth was more complicated than overwork and financial stress. The truth was that Tyler blamed me for his father leaving. Not in words, not directly, but in the way he'd flinch when I tried to hug him, in the way he'd roll his eyes when I'd suggest we spend time together, in the way he'd mention his father's new life with Jennifer, his 25-year-old secretary who apparently made real dinners and lived in a house with a 2-car garage. "Dad says you drove him away with your complaining," Tyler said one evening in March 1991, just weeks before his 18th birthday. The words hit me like physical blows. I was standing at the kitchen sink, washing dishes from our dinner of boxed macaroni and cheese. My hands stilled in the soapy water. "Tyler, that's not fair. Isn't it? You were always nagging him about money, about helping around the house, about spending time with us. Maybe if you'd just been happy with what we had." I turned to face my son, this beautiful boy who looked so much like his father it sometimes took my breath away. At almost 18, he was taller than me now, his voice deeper, but his eyes held the same wounded confusion I'd seen since he was small. "Honey, marriages are complicated. Your father and we had problems that had nothing to do with you." "Everything had to do with me," he shouted, his voice cracking the way it still did when emotions overwhelmed him. "He told me he never wanted kids in the first place. That having me ruined everything. That you trapped him." The plate slipped from my hands, shattering against the linoleum floor. But the sound of breaking ceramic was nothing compared to the sound of my heart splintering as I realized my ex-husband had poisoned my son against me with his own failures and regrets. Those conversations became more frequent as Tyler's 18th birthday approached. He'd throw Robert's words at me like weapons, each one precisely aimed to cause maximum damage. I began to understand that I wasn't just fighting for my son's love. I was fighting against his father's narrative, a story in which I was the villain who destroyed their perfect life. The final straw came on Tyler's 18th birthday in April 1991. I had saved for months to buy Tyler a used car for his birthday. It wasn't much, a 1985 Honda Civic with dents on both sides and an engine that wheezed, but it ran, and I knew how badly he wanted his independence. I'd worked extra shifts, skipped meals, and even pawned my grandmother's ring to scrape together the $1,500. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," I said, holding out the keys with shaking hands. We were standing in our driveway, morning light filtering through the maple tree that gave our street its name. Tyler stared at the keys, then at the car, then back at me. Something cold and hard settled in his eyes. "Dad's buying me a new Mustang." The words hit me like a slap.
What?
"He called last night. He's getting me a brand new Mustang for graduation. Red, with a sunroof." Tyler's voice was flat, emotionless. He said it's time I had something nice for once. Something I could be proud of. I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet. "Tyler, I've been saving for months. To buy me a piece of junk that'll break down before I even get to college?" He laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth.
Thanks, but no thanks, Mom.
"I'll wait for a real gift from someone who actually cares about me." "How can you say that?" Tears were streaming down my face, but I couldn't stop them. "Everything I do for you. Every double shift, every sleepless night worrying about bills, every sacrifice." Sacrifice. Tyler's voice rose to a shout. "You think working at a diner is a sacrifice? You think living in this dump is some kind of noble gesture? Dad was right about you. You're pathetic." The word hung in the air between us like poison. Pathetic. My own son, the child I'd given everything for, thought I was pathetic. "Get out," I whispered. "What?" "Get out of my house." My voice was stronger now, powered by a pain so deep it felt like drowning. "If I'm so pathetic, if this house is such a dump, if your father's new life is so much better, then go. Go live with him and his perfect girlfriend in their perfect house with their perfect car." Tyler stared at me for a long moment, and I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd take it back. Maybe he'd remember that I was his mother, that I'd loved him since before he was born, that every sacrifice had been made gladly because he was worth it. Instead, he shrugged.
"Fine.
"I'll call Dad to pick me up." And that's exactly what he did. I watched from my kitchen window as Robert pulled up in his new BMW, watched as Tyler threw his belongings into garbage bags, watched as my son walked out of my life without a single backward glance. The Honda Civic sat in the driveway like a monument to my failure, its keys still clutched in my palm. That night, I sat on Tyler's bed, surrounded by the remnants of his childhood. Baseball trophies, science fair ribbons, photographs of birthday parties and Christmas mornings when we'd been a family. I picked up a picture of Tyler at age 7, gap-toothed and grinning, his arms wrapped around my neck. Where did I go wrong? I whispered to the empty room. But the silence that answered me would last for the next 33 years. The first year without Tyler nearly destroyed me. I'd catch myself buying his favorite cereal at the grocery store, setting 2 places at the dinner table, leaving the porch light on in case he decided to come home. The house felt too big and too small all at once, too quiet without his music and laughter, too full of memories that had turned bitter. Mrs. Patterson tried her best to help. She'd invite me over for tea, listening patiently as I wondered aloud what I could have done differently. "That boy will come around," she'd say, patting my hand with her weathered fingers. Children say things they don't mean when they're hurting. But weeks turned to months, and months turned to years, and Tyler never came around. I tried reaching out at first. I called Robert's house, but Jennifer would answer with her sweet, practiced voice. "I'm sorry, Ella, but Tyler asked not to be disturbed. Maybe try again another time." Another time never came. I sent birthday cards to Robert's address, Christmas presents, graduation announcements when Tyler finished high school and then college. None of them were ever acknowledged. It was as if my son had vanished from the earth, taking with him every reason I'd had for existing. The depression crept in slowly, like fog rolling across a lake. Some mornings I couldn't find the strength to get out of bed. The diner manager, A gruff man named Bill Henderson showed more patience than I deserved when I'd show up late with red-rimmed eyes and shaking hands. "You need help, Ella," he said one afternoon as I mechanically wiped down tables. "There are people you can talk to, professionals." But what could a therapist tell me that I didn't already know? That I'd failed as a mother? That I'd driven away the one person who mattered most to me? That I was exactly as pathetic as my son believed? I began drinking wine in the evenings, just a glass or two to quiet the voices in my head. The voices that replayed every argument Tyler and I had ever had, every moment where I could have chosen different words, made different choices. The wine became a bottle, and eventually, I didn't need an excuse. Mrs. Patterson found me passed out on my front lawn one Tuesday morning in 1995. "Ella, honey, this has got to stop," she said as we sat in my kitchen, my head pounding and my mouth tasting like regret. "You're killing yourself, and for what?" "That boy made his choice." "He's my son," I whispered. "And you're a person worth saving, even if he can't see it right now." That conversation led to my first AA meeting, held in the basement of St. Mary's Catholic Church. I sat in a circle of folding chairs, listening to stories of loss and redemption, of bridges burned and sometimes rebuilt. The stories gave me hope, but they also made me realize something painful. Everyone else seemed to have hit rock bottom and bounced back. I felt like I was still falling. "My name is Ella, and I'm an alcoholic," I said during my third meeting, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. "Hi, Ella," the group responded in unison. "I started drinking because my son left me," I continued, my voice barely above a whisper. "And I don't know how to stop missing him." An older man named Frank spoke up after the meeting. "The thing about addiction, Ella, is that it's not really about the substance. It's about trying to fill a hole that can't be filled from the outside." "So, how do you fill it?" Frank smiled sadly. "That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Some people find God. Some find purpose. Some just find a way to live with the empty space. I chose sobriety, one day at a time, but the empty space remained. Years passed in a blur of routine. Work, AA meetings, lonely dinners, and sleepless nights. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Tyler had graduated from college, that he'd gotten married, that he'd started a business. Each piece of news felt like a knife wound, a reminder of all the moments I'd missed, all the conversations we'd never had. By the time Tyler turned 25, I realized I'd missed his entire adult life. His college graduation, his wedding day, the early years of his career. I'd become a ghost in my own son's story, present only in his memories and, I feared, only in the bad ones. On Tyler's 30th birthday in 2005, I broke down and hired a private investigator. "I just want to know if he's happy," I told the woman, a kind-faced detective named Sarah Chin. "I don't want to interfere. I just need to know he's okay." The report arrived 2 weeks later in a manila envelope that I was afraid to open. Inside were photographs of my son, now a grown man I barely recognized. He was taller than I remembered, his hair darker, his face more angular. He stood outside a beautiful house in suburban Columbus, his arm around a pretty blonde woman who must have been his wife. There were pictures of him at work, at restaurants, playing golf on weekends. He looked happy. He looked successful. He looked like he'd built a life that had no space for me in it. At the bottom of the report was a handwritten note from Sarah. "He has no children." When asked about his family by coworkers, he says his parents are both deceased. That's when I understood the true depth of his rejection. It wasn't just that Tyler didn't want me in his life. It was that he'd erased me from it entirely. In his version of the story, I didn't exist. I was dead to him. The years that followed blurred together in a haze of resignation. I moved from the house on Maple Street to a smaller apartment, unable to afford the mortgage on my diner wages. I attended my AA meetings faithfully, kept my job, maintained the routines that kept me functional. But inside, I felt hollow, like a tree that had been struck by lightning and was slowly dying from the inside out. Mrs. Patterson remained my only real friend, the only person who remembered Tyler as the sweet little boy he'd once been. We'd sit on her porch during summer evenings, watching neighborhood children play in their yards, and she'd occasionally mention seeing something on Facebook about Tyler's life. He divorced that wife of his, she told me one evening in 2019. Saw it on one of those social media posts. No children, apparently. I felt a stab of something, not quite hope but not indifference either. I hope he's okay. You know, Ella, it's never too late.
People change.
Hearts soften. But I'd learned to live without hope. It was safer that way. The turning point came on a Tuesday in March 2024, exactly 33 years after our last conversation. I was 72 then, living in a small one-bedroom apartment in downtown Cleveland. My hair had gone completely white, and arthritis had settled in my hands like an unwelcome houseguest. I'd retired from the diner 5 years earlier, living on Social Security and the small savings I'd managed to accumulate despite decades of financial struggle. Mrs. Patterson had passed away the year before, leaving me feeling more alone than ever. She'd been the closest thing to family I'd had for decades, the only person who remembered Tyler as the sweet little boy he'd once been. Her funeral had been small, attended mostly by neighbors and church friends, but I'd felt her loss like a physical ache. On this particular Tuesday, I was grocery shopping at the Kroger near my apartment, moving slowly through the aisles with my cart and my list. At 72, I'd learned to take my time with everything. Time was the one thing I had in abundance, even if purpose remained elusive. The grocery store had become my primary social interaction. I knew the cashiers by name, looked forward to brief conversations about the weather or local news. It was a small life, but it was mine, and I'd made peace with its limitations. "Excuse me, ma'am, are you buying a lottery ticket?" I looked up to see a young cashier, probably Tyler's age, smiling at me with the kind of patience reserved for elderly customers. I was standing in front of the lottery machine, apparently blocking access to the tickets while I searched my purse for my grocery list. "Oh, I'm sorry," I said, starting to move aside. "Wait," the cashier said, his name tag reading David. "The jackpot's up to 47 million this week. You should try your luck." I almost said no. I'd never been a gambling woman, never saw the point in throwing away money on impossible dreams. But something in David's smile reminded me of Tyler at that age, back when he still believed good things could happen. There was an earnestness to his suggestion, as if he genuinely believed that good things could still happen to people like me. "What number should I pick?" I asked, surprising myself. "Oh, you should pick numbers that mean something to you. Birthdays, anniversaries, that kind of thing." Without thinking, I chose Tyler's birthday, April 15th, 1975. Month 4, day 15, year 75. Then my own birthday, March 3rd, 1952. Month 3, day 3, year 52. Then the date we'd moved into the house on Maple Street in 1985, back when we'd still been a family, June 10th. Month 6, day 10. 7 numbers total, each one a memory I'd carried for 33 years. The ticket cost $5, money I probably should have spent on groceries. But as I tucked it into my purse, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, a tiny flutter of possibility. "Good luck, Mrs." David said. "Joseph. Ella Joseph. Good luck, Mrs. Joseph. I have a feeling about this one." That night, I sat in my recliner with a cup of tea, watching the lottery drawing on my small television. I'd almost forgotten about the ticket until the bright graphics and dramatic music filled my living room. The announcer, a woman with perfectly styled hair and an enthusiastic smile, began reading the numbers. "Tonight's winning numbers are 3, 6, 10, 15, 52, 75, and the bonus number is 4. The first number matched, then the second. By the third matching number, my hands had started shaking. The fourth and fifth numbers aligned perfectly with what I'd chosen. When the sixth number was called, I had to set down my tea to keep from dropping it. And tonight's bonus number, the announcer said, pausing for dramatic effect, is 4.
4.
April. The month Tyler was born. The month my son had entered this world and changed everything about who I was and who I wanted to become. I stared at the ticket in my trembling hands, reading the numbers over and over again, certain I'd made a mistake. But there was no mistake. 7 numbers, all matching perfectly. $47 million. At 72 years old, after a lifetime of struggle and loss, I'd won the lottery. I sat in my chair until dawn, the ticket clutched against my chest, wondering what this meant, what I was supposed to do with such an impossible stroke of luck. The money was staggering, more than I could spend in multiple lifetimes. But as the sun rose over Cleveland, painting my small apartment in golden light, I realized the money itself wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that for the first time in 33 years, I had something Tyler might want. Something that might make him listen to me. Something that might bring my son home. The next few weeks passed in a surreal blur of lawyers, financial advisors, and media attention I never expected. The Lottery Commission insisted on a press conference, complete with a giant check and photographs for the local newspapers. I stood there in my best dress, a navy blue outfit I'd worn to Mrs. Patterson's funeral, smiling awkwardly as cameras flashed. "What are you going to do with the money, Mrs. Joseph?" asked a reporter from Channel 5. I'd thought about this question constantly since that Tuesday night. "I want to help people," I said finally. "I want to make sure other people don't have to struggle the way I did." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. The whole truth was too complicated to explain to strangers with cameras. My lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Linda Morrison, walked me through the process of claiming the prize. After taxes, I'd receive roughly $28 million. Even reduced by half, it was still an incomprehensible amount of money. "You'll want to be careful about how you handle requests for financial help," Linda warned me during one of our meetings. "When news like this gets out, people come out of the woodwork. Family members you haven't heard from in years, charities, scam artists. Everyone's going to want a piece of this." "Family members I haven't heard from in years," I repeated softly. Linda must have heard something in my voice because she leaned forward, her expression gentling. "Ella, is there someone specific you're hoping will reach out?" I told her about Tyler then, about 33 years of silence, about the son who'd erased me from his life so completely that he told people I was dead. Linda listened without judgment, taking notes in her legal pad. "Have you considered reaching out to him directly?" she asked when I finished. "He made it clear he never wanted to see me again." I've respected that wish for over 3 decades. But circumstances have changed now. Have they? Or am I just a pathetic old woman who thinks money can buy back love? Linda set down her pen. "Ella, there's nothing pathetic about wanting a relationship with your child. The money doesn't change who you are or what you feel. But it might change his willingness to listen." Within a week of the press conference, my phone started ringing. Distant cousins I hadn't spoken to since childhood. High school classmates who'd tracked down my number through social media. Charities with heartbreaking stories and detailed funding requests. But not Tyler. I moved out of my small apartment and into a beautiful house in Shaker Heights, a Tudor-style home with a garden and enough bedrooms for the family visits that never came. The realtor, an energetic woman named Patricia, kept emphasizing the house's family-friendly features. "This would be perfect for when your children and grandchildren visit," she said, showing me the spacious dining room. "I don't have grandchildren," I said quietly. "And my son, we're not close." Patricia's face softened with understanding. "Well, maybe this house will give you a fresh start. Sometimes a new environment can open new possibilities." I hired a housekeeper named Maria, partly because the house was too big for me to manage alone, but mostly because the silence had become unbearable. Maria was a kind woman in her 40s with children of her own, and her maternal instincts seemed to kick in whenever she saw me staring out the windows with distant eyes. "Mrs. Joseph, why do you look so sad?" Maria asked one afternoon as she dusted the living room. "You have won the lottery. You should be happy." "I thought winning the lottery would solve my problems," I admitted. "But it's just highlighted the one problem money can't fix." Maria nodded knowingly. "You're missing someone. My son. He hasn't spoken to me in 33 years.
Ay, Dios mío.
33 years? What happened? I found myself telling Maria the whole story, from Tyler's 18th birthday to the present moment. She listened with the same focused attention she brought to her cleaning, occasionally shaking her head or making sympathetic sounds. "You know what I think," she said when I finished. "I think your son is scared." Scared of what? Scared of admitting he was wrong. Scared of facing what he's done. Men, they have such pride, especially about their mothers. The longer he waits, the harder it becomes to come back. That night, I made a decision that terrified me. I called Linda Morrison at home. "I want to set up a trust," I told her. "For Tyler. He gets access to half my winnings, but only if he agrees to have dinner with me. One dinner. That's all I ask." Linda was quiet for a long moment. "Ella, are you sure about this? It might look like you're trying to buy his affection." "Maybe I am," I said quietly. "But I'm 72 years old, Linda. How much time do I have left to waste on pride?" The trust was established within a week. $14 million held in Tyler's name, accessible only if he agreed to one dinner with his mother. Linda's office would send the paperwork to Tyler's business address, along with a brief letter explaining the terms. "What if he doesn't respond?" I asked Linda as we finalized the documents. "Then you'll know you tried everything," she said gently. "But Ella, I have a feeling he will." $14 million is hard to ignore, even for someone carrying a grudge for 33 years. Now all I had to do was wait. The waiting was the hardest part. Every day I'd check my phone, hoping to see a missed call from a number I wouldn't recognize but somehow would know was his. Every evening, I'd sit in my garden, planting flowers I might never see bloom, wondering if my son would call, or if I'd die still hoping for a reconciliation that would never come. 3 weeks passed. I began to think maybe Tyler had changed his name. Maybe the letter hadn't reached him. Maybe he truly wanted nothing to do with me even for $14 million. The possibility filled me with a despair deeper than anything I'd felt in years. But then, on a Thursday evening in April, my phone rang. The call came on a Thursday evening in April, 3 weeks after Linda had sent the trust documents. I was in my garden, planting tulip bulbs that would bloom the following spring. Gardening had become my therapy, a way to feel connected to something growing and alive. My phone rang from inside the house, and I almost didn't answer it. Most calls these days were from financial advisors or charity representatives. But something made me wipe the dirt from my hands and hurry inside. "Hello?" I said, slightly out of breath. "Is this Ella Joseph?" The voice was deeper than I remembered, weathered by 33 years of living, but unmistakably familiar. My heart stopped beating for what felt like an eternity. "Tyler?" A long pause. "Yes, it's me." I sank into the nearest chair, afraid my legs wouldn't support me. "Oh my God, Tyler. I got your lawyer's letter." His voice was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. "About the trust." "Yes." $14 million for one dinner. "Yes." Another pause, longer this time. "Why?" The question I'd been preparing for, the question that had kept me awake for weeks. "Because you're my son, and I love you, and I've waited 33 years to tell you that. You could have called. You could have written. You didn't need to win the lottery to contact me. His words stung because they were true. You told me you never wanted to see me again. I respected that. So why now? Because you're rich? Because I'm 72 years old, Tyler. Because I don't know how much time I have left, and because I can't die knowing my son thinks I'm dead. The silence stretched between us, filled with decades of hurt and misunderstanding. When Tyler spoke again, his voice was softer, less guarded. You know about that? About what I tell people. I know a lot of things, sweetheart. I know you graduated from Ohio State with a degree in business. I know you married a woman named Jennifer Collins in 2003. I know you started your own consulting firm and that you're successful. I know you play golf on Sundays and that you drive a BMW. You had me investigated. I had to know if you were okay. It was the only way. Tyler was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, there was something different in his voice, something that might have been vulnerability. Jennifer and I divorced 5 years ago. I'm sorry. Are you? Or are you glad that my perfect life wasn't so perfect after all? The question hit me like a physical blow. Tyler, I have never wanted anything but happiness for you. Even when you left, even when you refused to speak to me, even when you told people I was dead, all I ever wanted was for you to be happy. I wasn't happy, he said quietly. I haven't been happy in a very long time. Something in his voice broke open a place in my heart I'd kept locked for 33 years. Why? Because you can't build a life on anger, Mom. I tried, but anger isn't a foundation. It's quicksand.
Mom.
The word I'd waited over 3 decades to hear again. Will you have dinner with me? I asked, afraid to breathe while waiting for his answer. I don't want your money. This isn't about money, Tyler. It never was. Then why the trust? Why $14 million? Because I needed something that would make you listen to me. Something that would get your attention. Because apparently dying alone wasn't enough of a reason for you to pick up the phone. Tyler laughed, a sound with no humor in it. You always were dramatic. I learned from the best. You were quite the dramatic teenager, if I recall. Another pause, but this one felt different. Warmer somehow. I remember you making my Halloween costumes. You spent weeks on that Superman cape. You wore it everywhere for months. To the grocery store, to church, to bed. I thought you were magic then. I thought you could fix anything. I thought so too, I whispered. Will you really give me $14 million just to have dinner with you? I'll give you $14 million because you're my son, and I love you. The dinner is just the excuse I needed to make you listen. Tyler was quiet for so long I wondered if he'd hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. You know what the worst part is, Mom? I've wanted to call you for years. Every birthday, every Christmas, every time something good or bad happened in my life. But I was too proud, too ashamed. I kept thinking it was too late, that too much time had passed. It's never too late, sweetheart. Dad died 15 years ago. Did you know that? I heard.
I'm sorry.
His last words to me were about you. He told me he'd made a terrible mistake, poisoning me against you. He said he'd spent 15 years regretting it and that I shouldn't make the same mistake. Tears were streaming down my face. Tyler. But I was still too stubborn to listen. I let him die with that regret, and I kept carrying it for 15 more years. Saturday night. 7 o'clock. Do you remember the Italian place on Mayfield Road? Where we used to go for your birthday? Antonio's. Yes, I remember. I'll make a reservation. Tyler. Yeah, thank you. After he hung up, I sat in my kitchen and cried for 20 minutes straight. Not tears of sadness this time, but tears of relief so profound I felt like I was drowning in them. My son was coming home. After 33 years, my son was finally coming home. I called Maria immediately. needing to share the news with someone who would understand. "Mrs. Joseph, you sound different," she said when she answered. "Happy different." He called, Maria. Tyler called. "We're having dinner on Saturday." Gracias a Dios. I told you he would come around. What will you wear? What will you say? I laughed through my tears. I have no idea. I've been planning this conversation for 33 years, and now I can't remember a single word I wanted to say. You don't need to plan, Mrs. Joseph. Just be his mother. That's all he needs. Saturday arrived with the kind of spring weather that makes everything seem possible. I spent hours getting ready, changing outfits 3 times before settling on a simple black dress and pearl earrings. I wanted to look nice, but not like I was trying too hard. I wanted to look like a mother, not a stranger. Maria had offered to stay late to help me prepare, fussing over my appearance like a worried daughter. "You look beautiful, Mrs. Joseph," she said, adjusting my necklace. "Your son, he will see how much you love him. What if he changes his mind? What if he doesn't show up? He will show up. A man doesn't call his mother after 33 years just to disappoint her again." Antonio's hadn't changed much in 33 years. The same checkered tablecloths, the same smell of garlic and basil, the same warmth that had made it our special place when Tyler was young. I arrived early, my hands shaking as I gave the hostess Tyler's name. "Right this way, Mrs. Joseph. Your son called to confirm the reservation. He should be here shortly." I sat at our table, the same corner booth where we'd celebrated my 40th birthday, back when Tyler still smiled at my jokes and saved room for dessert. The years collapsed around me as I waited, every birthday dinner we'd shared in this restaurant playing through my memory like scenes from a movie. At exactly 7 o'clock, Tyler walked through the door. He was 49 now, his hair silver at the temples, his face carrying lines I hadn't put there. But his eyes were the same dark brown that had looked up at me with trust and love when he was small. He was taller than I'd expected, broader through the shoulders, wearing a navy suit that spoke of success and confidence. He spotted me immediately and walked over with purpose, his expression unreadable. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the table, 33 years of silence stretching between us like a chasm. "Hi, Mom," he said finally. We ordered food neither of us would eat, both too nervous to have much appetite. The conversation started carefully, circling around the big subjects like wild animals afraid to approach a fire. "You look good," Tyler said, unfolding his napkin with precise movements. "Wealthy life agrees with you." "The money doesn't matter to me, Tyler. It never has. Doesn't it?"
Come on, Mom.
$14 million to get me to have dinner with you? That doesn't exactly scream. Money doesn't matter. I set down my water glass and looked directly at him. "You're right. I used money to get your attention because it was the only thing I had that you wanted. But let me ask you something, Tyler. If I'd called you 6 months ago, before I won the lottery, would you have answered?" He was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working like he was chewing words he didn't want to swallow. "No," he said finally. "I wouldn't have. Then the money served its purpose. It got you here. But don't you see how messed up that is? That it took $14 million to get your son to have dinner with you?" "Yes," I said simply. "It's completely messed up. But you know what would be even more messed up? Dying without ever seeing you again, because I was too proud to use the only leverage I had." Tyler stared at me, and I saw something crack in his carefully constructed composure. "You really think you're going to die soon?" "Tyler, I'm 72 years old. I've had a heart attack, 2 bouts with pneumonia in the last 5 years, and arthritis that makes it hard to open jars. I'm not planning to die anytime soon, but I'm not naive about mortality either." "You had a heart attack?" The concern in his voice was unmistakable, and it gave me hope. 2 years ago. Mild one, but it was a wake-up call. Why didn't anyone tell me? Who was going to tell you, Tyler? You made it very clear that you wanted nothing to do with me. You tell people I'm dead, remember? He flinched as if I'd slapped him. That was easier than explaining. Explaining what? Explaining that I abandoned my mother because I was an angry, stupid kid who believed everything my father told me about you. The words hung in the air between us, raw and honest in a way that took my breath away. Your father was hurting too, I said carefully. Divorce makes people say things they don't mean. Don't defend him, Mom. Please don't defend him. He spent years poisoning me against you, and I was too young and too angry to see it. You were 18, Tyler. 18-year-olds are supposed to be angry and dramatic. They're not supposed to disappear for 33 years. Tyler's laugh was bitter. You want to know the really sick part? After Dad died, I found letters in his desk. Letters he'd written to you, but never sent. Apologies, mostly. He knew what he'd done to us, and he was too proud to fix it. Tyler. But I was too proud, too.
Too ashamed.
Too afraid that you'd hang up on me or tell me it was too late. So I let 15 more years pass, carrying his regret and mine. Tears were streaming down my face, but I didn't care. It's never too late, sweetheart. It's never too late, isn't it? I missed everything, Mom. I missed 33 years of your life. I missed the chance to take care of you when you were sick. I missed the chance to tell you I was sorry before you had to bribe me with lottery money to listen. You didn't miss everything, I said, pulling something from my purse. It was the photograph from his 7th birthday, the one I'd carried with me every day for 33 years. You want to know what I see when I look at this picture? Tyler stared at the faded photograph, his younger self grinning back at him with gap-toothed joy. I see a little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. I see a child who made me Mother's Day cards out of construction paper and macaroni. I see my son, Tyler, who I never stopped loving, not for one single day in 33 years. Tyler was crying now, silent tears that he didn't bother to wipe away. I love you too, Mom. I never stopped. Even when I was angry, even when I was telling people you were dead, I never stopped loving you. I reached across the table and took his hand, larger now but still recognizable as the small hand that used to fit perfectly in mine. Then we didn't miss everything, did we? We missed a lot, but not everything. Tyler squeezed my hand, and in that touch was 33 years of unspoken apologies, forgiveness, and love that had survived despite everything we'd done to kill it. So, what happens now? He asked, his voice thick with emotion. Now we figure out how to be a family again, I said. One dinner at a time. Tyler smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen from him all evening. I'd like that, Mom. I'd really like that. The waiter approached hesitantly, probably wondering why 2 customers were crying over untouched plates of food. Is everything all right here? He asked. Tyler looked up at him, his face radiant despite the tears. Everything's perfect, he said. We're celebrating a reunion. We talked until the restaurant closed, sharing stories from the years we'd lost, filling in gaps that seemed impossibly wide. Tyler told me about his marriage, his divorce, his business, his regrets. I told him about my struggles with depression, my recovery, my quiet life, my stubborn hope that someday he'd come back. You know what's funny? Tyler said as we walked to our cars. I used to drive by our old house on Maple Street sometimes, just to see if you still lived there. I moved out. I know. I saw the new family move in. I sat in my car across the street and cried like a baby. Why didn't you knock on my door when I still lived there? Tyler was quiet for a long moment. Because I was afraid you wouldn't forgive me. I was afraid you'd become someone I didn't recognize, someone hardened by what I'd done to you. And now I see that you're exactly who you always were. My mom. The woman who worked 2 jobs to buy me a car I was too stupid to appreciate. The woman who never gave up on me, even when I gave up on myself. When we finally parted ways in the parking lot, Tyler hugged me for the first time in 33 years. It was awkward at first, our bodies unfamiliar with each other, but then muscle memory kicked in, and I remembered how perfectly he used to fit in my arms. "Mom," he said as we separated. "Yes." "About the money."
The 14 million. I meant what I said.
"I don't want it, Tyler. I want something else instead." "What?" "I want to come to Sunday dinner next week. And the week after that. And every week for as long as you'll have me." I started crying again, but this time they were tears of pure happiness. "I'll have you forever, sweetheart. For as long as forever lasts." 6 months later, I'm sitting in my garden on a crisp October morning, watching Tyler help Maria plant bulbs for next spring's flowers. He comes for Sunday dinner every week now, sometimes bringing takeout from our favorite Chinese restaurant, sometimes cooking meals that remind me he learned more than anger from his years away. We're still learning how to be mother and son again. Some conversations flow easily, like no time has passed at all. Others are awkward, filled with references to experiences we didn't share, people the other doesn't know, inside jokes that exclude one of us. But we're patient with each other in a way we never were when he was 18, and I was overwhelmed. "You know what's funny?" Tyler said last Sunday, as we cleaned up after dinner. "I used to dream about having enough money to prove to you that I'd made something of myself. That I was successful despite everything. And now I realize you never cared if I was successful. You just cared if I was happy." The trust fund sits untouched in an account bearing Tyler's name. He's made it clear he doesn't want the money, but I haven't moved it back into my accounts either. It exists as a symbol now, a reminder that love can't be bought, only freely given. Perhaps one day he'll change his mind, or perhaps it will go to charities that help reunite families. For now, it serves its purpose simply by existing. I've started using my lottery winnings in ways that feel meaningful. There's a scholarship fund at Tyler's old high school for students from single-parent homes. There's a program at the local community center that provides job training for women over 50. There's a fund that helps pay for family therapy for estranged relatives trying to rebuild their relationships. You're trying to fix everyone else's family because you couldn't fix your own, Tyler observed one afternoon as I reviewed grant applications. "Am I?" "Yeah, but here's the thing, Mom. You did fix ours. It just took 33 years longer than you expected." Last week, Tyler brought me a surprise. He'd been cleaning out his apartment and found a box of things from his childhood that his father had given him years ago. Pictures, report cards, artwork I'd forgotten existed. But at the bottom of the box was something that made me cry all over again. It was the Mother's Day card he'd made me when he was 8, constructed from red construction paper and white doilies, with a poem written in careful second-grade handwriting. "My mom is the best mom in the world. She makes good food and hugs me when I'm sad. She works hard every day to take care of me. I love her more than video games and ice cream. Happy Mother's Day, Mom. Love, Tyler." "I kept it," he said quietly as I held the card with trembling hands. "Even when I was angry, even when I told people you were dead, I kept it. I never knew why until now." "Why now?" "Because some love is too deep to throw away, even when you're trying your hardest to forget it." The card sits on my kitchen counter now, next to a photograph Tyler took of us at Antonio's the night we reunited. We look older, more weathered, marked by the years we spent apart. But we're smiling, and in our smiles is the echo of every birthday celebration, every bedtime story, every moment of joy we shared before anger and pride got in the way. People ask me sometimes if I regret the 33 years we lost. The answer is complicated. I regret the pain, the silence, the missed opportunities to comfort each other through life's inevitable sorrows. I regret that Tyler's father died without repairing the damage he'd done, and I regret that Mrs. Patterson never got to see her prayers answered. But I don't regret the journey that brought us back to each other. Because without those years of loss, we might never have learned how precious our relationship really is. Without the lottery ticket, Tyler might never have found the excuse he needed to swallow his pride. Without 33 years of missing each other, we might take for granted the miracle of sitting across a dinner table, sharing stories and laughter, and the comfortable silence that exists between people who truly know each other. Do you think everything happens for a reason? Tyler asked me recently as we worked together in the garden, our hands dirty with soil and hope. I think we create reasons for everything that happens, I replied, watching him plant tulips with the same careful attention he'd once given to his homework. We take the random, senseless events of life and weave them into stories that help us understand who we are and where we're going. So, what's the story you're telling yourself about us? I thought about it for a long moment, watching him work. At 49, he has his father's hands but my stubborn streak, Robert's eyes but my capacity for forgiveness. I'm telling myself the story of a mother who loved her son enough to wait 33 years for him to come home. And a son who loved his mother enough to come back, even when pride and fear told him it was impossible. That's a good story, Mom. It's our story, sweetheart. And the best part is, it's still being written. Tonight, Tyler is coming for dinner again. Not because $14 million is waiting for him, but because this is what families do. They show up for each other, week after week, year after year, building relationships one shared meal at a time. I'm 73 now, and I don't know how many years I have left. But I know this. When my time comes, Tyler will be there. Not because money convinced him to care, but because love found a way to survive even the longest winter. And maybe that's the real lottery I won. Not the $47 million that bought my son's attention, but the chance to discover that some bonds are too strong to break permanently, no matter how hard we try. Some love is patient enough to wait 3 decades for a second chance. Some hearts are brave enough to risk rejection one more time. And sometimes, just sometimes, the impossible becomes possible when we're willing to set aside our pride and remember what really matters. My son is coming to dinner tonight. After 33 years of silence, he's coming home. And I'm finally, completely whole again. Thank you for joining us for this extraordinary story of patience, forgiveness, and the enduring power of a mother's love. If Ella's journey moved you, please subscribe to her journey for more real tales of women rising from heartbreak to healing. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that it's never too late to rebuild the relationships that matter most. What bridge in your own life needs rebuilding? What conversation have you been putting off because pride or fear stands in the way? Let us know in the comments, and remember, your true story is still being written. Sometimes the most beautiful chapters come after the longest, darkest nights. Subscribe to her journey, and let's discover together that every ending can become a new beginning.